What if retirement isn't the reward we were promised, but the beginning of a new kind of identity crisis? Welcome to Centered, Becoming Whole in a Chaotic World. This is a podcast about orientation, integration, and the lifelong work of becoming whole. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, a PhD exercise physiologist with a deep interest in the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. My guest is Jerjian, a retirement mindset mentor, creator of the DARE method, and an Emmy-winning storyteller. George's work is grounded in research from a 20,000 retiree survey that explores what really happens when people leave work behind. He believes many of us aren't meant to retire in a traditional sense, but to unretire, to re-engage life with purpose, creativity, and vitality. Today, we're talking about retirement mindset, identity, and how to have the courage to be comfortable being uncomfortable and uncomfortable being comfortable. We talk a lot on this podcast about purpose with a capital P. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, and is kind of go back to the conversation with Dr. Burnight as well. It's, joy, identity really form the foundation for that big P purpose. And so many of us, we spend our lives in that small P purpose where our identity is, I'm an accountant, I'm a exercise physiology professor, I'm a father, I am a husband, and not really getting to who are we really. And I think that's a profound conclusion that you've come to. And I think it's an important thing for our viewers and listeners to hear and to understand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jeff. And I think Dr. Kelly actually did capture quite a bit of this, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But I think the way she was coming through was I was getting what she was saying. And I think she was absolutely right. But you're also right, because purpose with a capital P, people think, well, who the hell do you think you are to have a big P? Right?
Right.
You have to be an egomaniac to have a big P. But actually, that's not true. I think we're all capable of having a big P purpose, as it were, a purpose with a big P, because I think we have a higher self that we're disconnected from. And particularly in these challenging times that we live in, where we can't tell, well, we know the difference between truth and lies, but the entire social media is permeated with so much falsehood that I'm almost lost for words. Well, I am lost for words, because we're trapped in this place where if we allow it, we drown in this stuff. And the only way I feel that we can survive this and surmount it and rise above it is to reach out to our higher selves. So, for example, I studied people like Cicero. Cicero wrote a book in his old age, and it was called On Old Age. And in it, he had 10 lessons, and they're really basic, but so profound. And they speak from like over 2,000 years ago. They still speak with freshness and resonance to us today. And it's like one of them, for example, would be like, what other people think is none of our business. And we are imprisoned in our heads by what other people think, which stops us from moving forward and doing what we should and want to be doing. So I tell my clients, I take them to their deathbed and I say, you're on your deathbed. Do you really think that you care about what other people will be thinking now? And given what you now know, would you still continue doing what you did? Or did you miss out on doing something profound that you wanted to do? Even if whatever it is that you're doing or want to do is not significant in the big picture of things, it could be significant in the community that you live in. It could change the lives of a lot of people in your community. Just you being who you're meant to be. And the other thing I use a question is, I use a quote from American mythologist Joseph Campbell, who said, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And I realized what he meant by the cave. He's talking about our mind. It's a cavern. And we're afraid to delve into that. We're afraid to turn stones over to see what's underneath, because we're so afraid we're going to find oh my God, what will I find? And it'll take me away from the people I love. A scary thing, right? But actually, it's liberating to find out what it is that you'd love to do. Because if you're happy with what you're going to be doing, don't you think your family is going to be contaminated by that joy or happiness that you're feeling? And imagine how that will impact and teach your children and grandchildren by taking that action, instead of drifting into oblivion and trying to please people around you by not ruffling feathers.
Yeah, and I challenge you a little bit. You said, people are capable of big P purpose. I think we're intended for big P purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think it's our job to kind of help bring that out in people as well. And I like to, when I write the word extraordinary, I put parentheses around extra, because a lot of people think in order to be extraordinary or to have that big P purpose, you have to have, like you said, a level of significance. You have to be a celebrity, or you have to be well known, or you have to be in a position of power. And extraordinary and purpose can all come from the simplest of people. Whatever your role in life is, if you're, what you might say, oh, I'm just a custodian at the elementary school. Well, you can change lives, affect people so effectively in that position. I had a guest on my other podcast who talked about, I think it was the other podcast, or no, it was this podcast, but he talked about the influence of the bus driver when he was in elementary school. He's talking to the bus driver, and it's like, why are you just a bus driver? And she's like, I wouldn't have any other position. And it's like, I get to, interact with you kids every day, and, get to drive you to school so that you can learn. And just, she had this great sense of purpose in what she was doing. She says, I could be a teacher, but, I make as much as the teachers are making. And I get to, in the middle of the day, we sit in the break room and play cards. And, it's a pretty easy life, but I get to impact you kids. And, it was in that moment of that conversation, he realized how much impact that woman had on his life going forward. And, we don't think that we get influenced by other people, or we don't think that we influence people. And I think, just the simplest thing of interacting, even giving a smile to somebody as you pass them on the street, can have a profound effect on our world. It's like,
that is so true. That is so true. And it doesn't cost you much to smile at people. No. You're absolutely right. And actually, let's talk about the big P and the small p for purpose. I mean, I wrote a book called Dare to Discover Your Purpose. And I had a few heavyweight gerontologists and educationalists who kind of said, well, not everybody has a big P in their purpose. A lot of people are happy with the small p in their purpose. And I go, yeah, possibly. But my sense was that you are right, Jeff. I think everybody has the capacity for a big P in their purpose, because it's not about your station in life or your job or whatever it is you do. It's how you do it and how you approach that. And really, I think it's the energy and love you bring to your job and your work, which makes the difference between the kind of purpose that you have. Is it with a big P or a small P? So it's not the title, as you said.
Yeah. So what do you mean by unretirement?
Okay. The whole concept of retirement is something I've studied. All right. I mean, in our recorded history, retirement was initiated by a guy called Caesar Augustus, who introduced it to get the Imperial Roman army on side after his uncle Julius was assassinated. And ever since then, it's been a way of holding people close so they don't, well, in his case, he didn't want any of them to overthrow him. So he wanted to make sure all his generals and his soldiers were well looked after. Now, a lot of them didn't make it to old age, but those who did were greatly compensated. And then, of course, you had Abraham Lincoln later introduced pensions to young soldiers for recruiting purposes for the Union Army. Bismarck of Germany introduced it because he was fearful the Marxists were going to overwhelm Germany, because the Germans were falling in love with Marxism. And so everybody had a reason for doing this. Even Roosevelt introduced it because some guy in California was recommending that everybody in the United States should get a pension. And Roosevelt panicked and introduced a pension where people had to contribute to it, so it wasn't free. But there's always a reason. And companies introduced it as golden handcuffs to hold their employees down so they wouldn't go. But longevity, of course, has killed the retirement equation. Because back in the day when you retired, you lived for 2-3 years, you got your golden watch, and you passed away soon after from boredom, probably. But now, in the last 20 years and more, long life, people are living to the age of mid-80s, and we're even moving towards the age of 100s. And whatever monies you've saved in your pension or retirement or your IRA or 401s is never going to cover you till you die. And that's why such a large number of people know they're going to outlive their savings. So people stay on and work. But what they don't realize is that you don't need to stay on and work in your current job for the rest of your life or for as long as you can go. Because if you've got another 20 plus years, why not find something you love to do? And then, hey, you won't have to work another day. But to answer your question about unretirement, I introduced that word, although it existed before me. I introduced unretirement because you have to enjoy, I think, retirement for about 12 months, maybe 18 months. Do your bucket list before it's too late. Don't postpone that bit. Satiate yourself with all the things you wanted to do in retirement. And by 18 months, the honeymoon period is over for you. You're done. And at this point, if you're forewarned early enough, you'll know time to unretire and find a new identity and a new purpose for this next chapter of your life. But you have to unretire. You have to make that rite of passage. And I call it a gap year, a sabbatical. And to that extent, I went on my own gap year back in 2024. I went on an epic gap year. And I'm so happy I did it, because I wouldn't be able to do it again now. I wouldn't be able to be insured. I'm 70 now, 71. And I went when I was 69. So I just managed to get an insurance cover to take me around the world in 80 days, which is something I've always wanted to do, having read Jules Verne's book. And I thought to myself, I really want to do this. And then that inner dialogue was, it's too much money, it's too much time. Don't be childish, forget this. This is mad. And as soon as I started dabbling, looking into prices, hotels, where I was going to go, what countries would I go to, how long would I spend in each country, I was so excited. My spirit was so uplifted. I thought, this feels too good to say no to. And I did eventually go on that 80-day journey, which I loved and opened up my mind to new opportunities. And I don't recommend people do around the world in 80 days. So let me just put that out there. But you can go and live for a couple of months in a different state, even in a different town, whatever it is. Just get out of the coziness of where you live, the comfort of the friends that you currently have. Go take the risk of learning new, to have a beginner's mindset. And you will be shocked at how kind people are. Because also you're humbler, because you're now in foreign territory. It's not your comfort zone. So you are changing because you realize you need other human beings. And when you recognize that you're not the all-powerful person that you think you are in your local place, you're slightly humbler. And when you're humbler, people respond to you in a different way. I quote one guy, the author Paulo Coelho, who wrote The Alchemist, and he talks that, travel, it's not about becoming someone or becoming something. It's about unbecoming who we are so that we can become who we really are. It's about getting rid of the masks that we have placed on ourselves and unbecoming. And in a sense, that encapsulates what my Round the World in 80 Days did for me. I discovered my better part, my higher part, the person that I would like to be, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And it got me wanting to retire so I can unretire. Because I've never really given thought to retirement. I just kind of looked at, okay, well, how would I work differently once I can kind of finally get past my teaching assignment and do something else? Part of what I'm doing right now is something I hope that, carries me into, I guess, my unretirement. But you're right. We need to get reconnected with ourselves, and maybe just connected with ourselves, because how many of us go through our entire lives never really fully understanding who we are or what our big P purpose is?
Yeah, and I think you're right, because I think what it is that when we're young, we're students, and then we move into the adult world, we take a gap year. Not all of us, obviously, but young people take a gap year to get to know who they are. But we don't have a rite of passage when we stop work before we retire. There's no bridge, there's no rite of passage. And it's not a linear road. You can't just walk into retirement. Something massively is going to change in your life. And you can't just pretend it's just, it's a walkthrough. It's seismic. Because almost, and of course it differs from person to person, but for example, if you've been in a specific line of work for X number of years and you retire, your identity, who you were, is gone, but you're not aware that that is gone. So you're hanging on to that, right? All your certificates are up on the wall in your home office, and your cups and your awards or whatever you have. That's part of who you were. And people are so enamored with that identity of theirs that, frankly, they're scared to move anywhere in a new direction, because their entire world, the world under their feet, will collapse. And it's a scary place to be. But you're imprisoned in your own mind. And how do you make that transition? I think there's two ways. One, you really got to do some exploration. And I talk about an inventure. You got to go within. The answers are within. You're not going to find the answers outside of you. And most of us are looking outside. But the answers are within. And that's the last place we look for it.
It brings me to the question about your DARE method. And that's an acronym, I assume, DARE method. What does each part represent?
If I may take a step back, DARE is an acronym, correct? But it's also another word for courage. And people, I think, I didn't understand what courage was in the same level I do now. Courage comes from the Latin word cor, meaning heart. And again, we always look for the answers in our head, not our heart. We don't trust our heart so much because we've spent years enslaving it to make sure it follows what we're thinking. You need to have heart to make the right decisions. We're not who we think we are. We've created a facade, a mask. And over the years, we've chiseled that mask. So the strongest part of us is what we show the world out there. No weakness, no chinks in the armor. But I think, as Dr. Brené Brown talks about, is our strength actually is in our vulnerability, not our invincibility. And we're never taught that. We're taught to get strong. We're not taught to show weakness, whereas actually weakness is strength, in the sense the paradox is that if you are strong enough to be able to show your vulnerability, that is a power. That's what connects you to people. So when you're honest and authentic, people know it. You can't mask that. You can't pretend it. Well, I mean, you can. I'm not sure how effective it will be, but and so being authentic and being vulnerable takes courage, but it also shows strength. And so courage is an important component to unretire and discover new layers of identity that you have, that are part of you that you've not used. And this next stage of life, you need to get those aspects of your personality and who you are out there so you can use it. Again, it's a power. So you don't need to stick back and try to find work in areas of where you were before, which is what we do as a fallback. Why can't I find the work that I've been doing all these years? Because I say this as a joke. Nobody wants you there. You're meant for higher things, the things that you're afraid of. That's where you need to be looking. And so DARE is courage, but it's also an acronym, as you quite rightly said, Jeff. D, the letter D is for discover. Discover what retirement is and what it's not. There are 8 billion people out there. There's 8 billion definitions of retirement. But most of them are floozies, because there's the real stuff about what retirement is and what it's not. And a lot of it is illusionary and delusions, not reality based. And so when we get rid of the delusions and illusions, we're left with what we've got, and it doesn't look pretty. So how do you address it? So I try to get people to understand what retirement is and what it's not, and to get rid of the illusions and delusions of it so they can face the reality. The next letter, A, is assimilate. Assimilate new information about how our mind works, right? We think we understand what thinking is. What we don't realize is that the subconscious mind is such a powerful aspect of our mind, and we've never been taught how it works and how we can use it to our advantage. So just for example, we think our conscious mind, if I make a decision, I'm going to stick with it, right? How many times have you used willpower for a New Year's resolution? And how did that work out for you?
I don't do New Year's resolutions.
Well, there you go. You've given up.
No, I haven't given up. I just have evolved more of a mindset that change is necessary, and I have to have a growth mindset. And I grow day by day, moment by moment, rather than waiting until new calendar, flip a new calendar around, and now I have to make change. And, if I don't make New Year's resolutions, but I resolve what I'm going to do today, I have a motto: be your best today, be better tomorrow. And if I do that, if I stumble today, if I don't do well, I haven't failed. I've learned something to go into the next day. And so that's always been kind of my mindset. I don't remember the last time I ever really did New Year's resolutions.
Yeah. No, fair point. The reason I bring it up is because it's not about consciously making a resolution or a decision as to what you're going to do. Our subconscious mind has paradigms, and it works like a thermostat. If you hit the thermostat above it, it'll bring it back. If you hit below it, it'll bring it back. It's like a thermostat. That's the way the paradigm works. And so how do you overcome that? You need to change the script in your head, right? So, which comes to the growth mindset and fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is, I can't do this. The growth mindset is, I can't do this yet. That's a pivot. Mm-hmm. 3-letter word, yet, pivots from an absolute, I can't do this, to I can't do it yet, which means I can do it soon. Or what? So it changes the dynamic of the plasticity of how you move here. So it's about knowing how to work with your subconscious mind so that you can align it. And it's about changing the script in your head. R is rewire, which is that script we're talking about, right? And E is for expand, because once you open the rewiring aspect of your head, the Japanese have a word called shoshin, which means a beginner's mindset. A beginner's mindset is one of, I'm not an expert, I don't know, but I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm curious. I'm very intrigued by a certain work or something, a hobby or whatever it might be that you want to do. And you come in with humility, because you're a beginner, and you learn. And when you're in that state of mind, the possibilities are endless. If you come in as a know-it-all, an expert, everything's very limited because you've already crossed out everything. So this is all you got left, and you'd have no room to maneuver. And so that's where the rewiring comes. And the expansion is, well, with 20 plus years to go as a retiree, why would you be shutting things down? why would you be making your sandbox smaller and smaller and smaller? It's not God's waiting room. You got 20 plus years to go. And this is where I love introducing Mary Oliver, the American poet laureate, who said, "What will you do with your one wild and precious life? What will you do with your one wild and precious life?" And that's a question we should all be asking.
And it's not a question that, we ask early in life. We can ask it every day. It's,
Yes.
I think of, one of my blog is titled Carpe Memento. I wanted to call it Carpe Friggin Diem, but my dad pointed out to me, and you would know that friggin is kind of somewhat derogatory in your neck of the woods. And so, okay, I won't do it. And so I kept it as Carpe Memento. But, it's just seize the moment. We talk about seize the day, but that, there's still hours and minutes ahead of you in the day, but the moment you have right now, what are you going to do right now? Because this next step that you take is going to have a tremendous impact on the world. You might not think it, but it's going to. And it's the same thing, when we want to go back in time. I bring this up a lot on this podcast. People ask the question, what would you do? What would you change if you can go back in time? I wouldn't change anything because I'm where I'm at right now for the purpose of being here right now. And it's not a matter of, can I change the past to get somewhere else? I can change the future by just changing the moment.
Exactly.
And that's the mindset I think you're talking about. And I love it.
Exactly. And, to your point as well, because I know that your work is on physical fitness and there's a lot to be said for that. Energy, physicality, it's all integrated. The mind, you have to bring your mind to your physical energy, right? To direct it, to push it in the right direction. And then there's the emotional side. Now, we talk about nutrition and wellness and all that stuff, all good things. But there's also nurturing our emotional needs and our psychological needs. And I'd even go as far as to say our spiritual needs. And so it's an integrative thing. And, we talked about joy, and our joy covers purpose. It covers spirituality. It covers quite a few of these areas. And so it's kind of holistic. It's not one, you can't just do 2 or 3 and ignore the rest.
We, on this podcast, I've long referred to it as well-centered fitness, being, coming from exercise physiology. Of course, I'm going to have a more, exercise perspective to things, but always address the model of wellness is, spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. And it was a friend of mine, Jay, from high school, and Jay's getting sick of me pointing out every time I talk about spies, I give him credit for it. But, we were having a conversation once because, we reconnected years after high school, and he started listening to the podcast. And he's like, I noticed you always talk about, the spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. He said, are you intentional in putting it in that order? And I'm like, well, sort of, because I think the spiritual and the physical are the most important. But he's like, because it spells out the acronym SPIES. I never thought of that before. And so now we refer to it as the SPIES model. But I think all 5 of those are so critically important. But if we don't start with the foundation of both the physical and the spiritual, and I wholly believe that we are evolving toward where the spiritual and the physical are returning to being kind of one, where you can't separate our physical and the spiritual. I mean, you go into physics. Physics is getting so small, we're getting smaller and smaller to eventually we're going to get to a point where we no longer have any more material. We have to have that, whatever's in between, and that's, I think it was Aristotle that talked about form and matter. And, you go the opposite direction, you expand and expand and expand in the universe. Eventually, we're so spread out and so big, what's left? And you don't have to believe in a God. You don't have to believe in religion. But this idea that there is something bigger than self is so essential to us functioning as human beings.
I think without question. I think science and spirituality are also getting closer and closer together. In the sense of, and let's not mix religion with spirituality, but spirituality doesn't have borders. I think quantum physics has also changed the outlook of science on spirituality and spirituality on science. It's literally two sides of the same coin. And quantum physics is about energy. It's not about matter, energy. And so hence Einstein's E equals to mc squared. He didn't do it with M. He didn't start with mass. He started with energy. And everything in life has energy. And Einstein said, you can't create or destroy energy. You can only transform it. So take, we have energy, spirit. When we die, the spirit leaves and we're gone. We're just the carcass. If you look at a piece of wood, a wooden chair or a wooden table, it has energy. It has energy in there. It's not just matter. And the energy is moving, but it's very slow and very spread out. Whereas obviously water, light, much faster. I think our conception of who we are, what we are, and what life is evolving. And we know what we know is only such a small fraction of what life is. But it's conversations that get this out.
What are you doing personally to age well?
Gosh. I think I'm trying to, in a nutshell, I'm trying to become really comfortable with being uncomfortable. In other words, there's a part of me that likes the comfort of home, and then there's a part of me that likes adventure. If I stay in one place too long, I get antsy. If I stay out too long on the road, so to speak, I crave for home. And so it's finding that balance and not getting too enamored of one or the other. Trying to find comfort in that instability and making that instability a form of stability. It's kind of living in a paradox, which nobody teaches us to live in a paradox, even though I would say probably 99% of the planet lives in a paradox.
I like that. It's the idea of being uncomfortable with being comfortable, but being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So where can our viewers and listeners find your book, connect with you to learn more about, the workshops and the different services that you just mentioned?
Probably the easiest one is to go to my website, which is Jerjian.com. That's Jerjian.com.
And we'll provide that link in the description notes.